I call the March 19th, 2024 City Council regular meeting and work study session to order. City Clerk Ben Lane, please conduct the roll call.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor David Ortega,
Present.
Vice Mayor Solange Whitehead,
Here.
Council Members Tammy Caputi,
Here.
Tom Durham,
Here.
Barry Graham, Betty Janik,
Here.
and Kathy Littlefield.
Here.
City Manager Jim Thompson,
Here.
City Attorney Sherry Scott,
Here.
City Treasurer Sonia Andrews, Acting City Auditor Leigh Clough,
Here.
and the clerk is present. Thank you, Mayor.
Excellent. We have Scottsdale Police Sergeant Eric Bowles, as well as Sergeant Brian Heiner, and firefighter Jake Laurent. If anyone needs assistance, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll call on Ms. Caputi. Well, I will call our attention to the ongoing wars in foreign countries as they fight to protect their democracy and freedom. Also, considering that our military and Navy are in danger and in harm's way, please join with me in a moment of silence and reflection. Thank you. Well, we have a special visitor here today, and I notice we have a full house, so I understand that Sheriff Jack is in the building. Let's see. Oh my gosh. Yay. Sheriff Jack is our mascot for Bonanza. Bonanza is our spring festival held here in the Civic Center lawn, and all family, kids, and friends are invited on Saturday, March 30th. So we have a special guest who's very Sonoran Desert aware and here to greet us. So why don't we just, Council, let's go down and say hello.
All right. Well, I have a proclamation, very important proclamation, which I will read and then ask our city staff to come forward. Proclamation. Whereas social work is a profession truly dedicated to helping people, and whereas with the experience and understanding that poverty and trauma can create lifelong social and economic disadvantages
social workers, caseworkers, and their support teams help people to overcome challenges and regain their life. Whereas social workers enter the profession with a strong desire to help empower individuals, families, and our community to overcome issues that prevent them from reaching their full potential. And whereas the City of Scottsdale has a strong tradition of providing excellent support for our seniors, families, and others who find themselves needing assistance through wonderfully caring human services staff at Granite Reef Senior Center, Via Linda Senior Center, Vista del Camino Center, Paiute Neighborhood Center, and Youth and Family Services. Therefore, I, David D. Ortega, the Mayor of Scottsdale, do declare the month of March as Social Work Month in Scottsdale and urge our community to acknowledge the tireless efforts and numerous contributions made by the social work employees. Please come forward. Thank you. Well, and finally, just around the corner is Tour de Scottsdale. Tour de Scottsdale is back and includes cyclists, avid cyclists of all levels, and you can get more information. There are 3,000 slots and fewer than 300 left. That's coming on April 13th, and you can find more information at tourdescottsdale.org. The Sonoran Conservancy is the major steward of that event, and it's going to be very exciting here in Scottsdale. Moving on, we have two presentations. One is the Spirit of Scottsdale Awards presentation. The presenters are Lois Lamb and George Spatola. They are commissioners with the National Advisory Commission.
Good evening, Mayor, Ortega, and City Council. As members of the Neighborhood Advisory Commission, we are here this evening to present the winners of the 2023 Spirit of Scottsdale Awards program. Next slide, please.
The Neighborhood Advisory Commission advises and makes recommendations to the City Council on policies, plans, strategies, and programs for the preservation, improvement, and revitalization of our neighborhoods. One such program is the Spirit of Scottsdale Awards, an annual program that recognizes residents and organizations or businesses that help to strengthen and build Scottsdale's community through their commitment and to the involvement in neighborhoods embodying the spirit of Scottsdale. The Commission determined the winners based on each nominee's active years of service or involvement, reviewing for unique contributions of time, effort, skills, and financial resources provided to our community. We would like to now highlight the 2023 winners from each category, but ask that applause be held until both winners have been announced. Next slide.
The winner of the 2023 Individual Award goes to Matt Patzloff. Matt has been the principal of Navajo Elementary for many years and was nominated for his dedication to his students and his craft. Whether it be playing sports or securing grants to support their well-being, Matt's daily efforts reflect a genuine passion for his job and the community he serves. He truly embodies the spirit of Scottsdale. Thank you for all you do, Matt. Congratulations. And one more thing, Matt. I hear you're a cheesehead, and one of your dogs is named Lambo. And not only that, you're from Green Bay. Now, all of that is in itself awesome.
Next slide. The 2023, the Neighborhood Advisory Commission recognizes Neighbors Helping Neighbors as a 2023 Organization Award winner. Neighbors Helping Neighbors is a nonprofit organization that has been making a difference in Scottsdale for more than 10 years. It is run entirely by volunteers who are passionate about helping their neighbors in need. Every dollar donated to Neighbors Helping Neighbors goes directly to the community, supporting programs that benefit children, veterans, and low-income families. The organization works closely with local partners to provide essential services and resources for those who have no other options. This recognition is very well deserved. Congratulations, Neighbors Helping Neighbors.
Thank you to all those who submitted nominations to this year's program, and to you, Mayor and Council, for your time this evening. Now please recognize the 2023 Spirit of Scottsdale Award winners, Matt Patzloff and Neighbors Helping Neighbors.
You want to walk these over to him?
Yeah, I did. Please come forward to accept your award and have a photo taken with the mayor.
Thank you, kids, for everything you do, and so happy to have you here and the excitement. So be sure, Bonanza, we'll see you on March 30th, Saturday. Next, we have a presentation from the museum, the Western Spirit, Scottsdale's Museum of the West. This is an update provided to council. Todd Bankefier is the president and chief executive officer. Welcome, Todd. Great to see you.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you so very much for having me, and I know the clock starts now. Good evening. My name is Todd Bankefier. I am the CEO and executive director at Western Spirit, Scottsdale's Museum of the West. My childhood was set on a ranch in northern Nevada, and it just gives me the chills each day because I feel a very strong attachment to the Western Spirit Museum when I walk in it every day. I love coming to work because I believe so strongly in the pursuit of maintaining the arts culture in this community and the Western arts culture as well. Advance. There we go. Our partnership is very strong. 2010, 2011, Mike Fox, my predecessor, came before the TDC, the Tourism Development Commission, and the City Council to discuss an idea of a Western museum back in 2010. In 2012, they came back to the City Council to build this partnership from the beginning with a recommendation from the Tourism Development Commission to use the bed tax to build the Western Museum. The council approved it. 2015, we opened the doors. 2016, we became a Smithsonian affiliate. That's unheard of, to get a Smithsonian affiliation within 1 year. And today, 2024, the bed tax money is still being used to fund the city's annual collection or allocation to the museum. And I'm here on behalf of all the docents, the staff, and the trustees of the museum to say thank you to all of you. Hoping you're enjoying those quotes at the bottom of the slides. Those are our guests that we got out of our guest book. If we go back 40 plus years or so, Senator Barry Goldwater was one of the most staunchest advocates of the arts community in our city as well as our state. He felt strongly about maintaining the arts community. As June Bruner always reminds me on a regular basis, arts are part of our DNA here in Scottsdale. The arts are part of our DNA. The idea of a Western Museum in Scottsdale dates back to almost 30 years, when Herb Drinkwater was mayor, and he believed strongly in growing the arts community and having a Western Museum to showcase the Western heritage right here in Scottsdale. Senator Goldwater even had his own exhibition in our museum of his Arizona photography, if everybody remembers that. And today, we have Tom Gillian, one of the most prolific Western artists, who has introduced digital painting to us, an ability to paint multiple paintings and have them morph together over 15 to 20 minutes as you stare there at the museum to look at them. He has introduced us to something very special, so if you haven't come to the Gillian exhibit, please come by. We should all remember those visionaries like Senator Goldwater, Mayor Drinkwater, Jim and Sandy Bruner, people like Joan Fadala and Paul Messenger and Rachel Sacco. They would all hold these makeshift meetings in the back of Messenger Mortuary and talk about this idea of a Western Museum. We can never forget them, because they are the ones that kept the arts alive. They're the ones that remembered, did the passionate work to make sure that our Western Museum came to be. We also thank all of you on this council. And all of the council members in the past over the last 25 years, as well as the Tourism and Development Commission, the last 15 years that have worked so hard to be the pioneers and visionaries about making this museum really happen. So we're thankful to every one of you, and we couldn't have done it without each and every one of you. It's vital that we evolve from here, from 24 past. We have set down a plan that will considerably increase the attendance over the next 5 years, and the results have already started to happen. While increasing our marketing budget, increasing our hours of operation, and utilizing our beautiful, iconic building as an event venue, we have increased the attendance at our museum 17+% over the last 6 months. This is a video that we put together. Oh, if you can hear it. No?
It's a historic collection of fabulous Western and Native American art, a place of history-changing stories where you can let your imagination run wild.
I'm very grateful to the city tourism and events director, Karen Churchard, and her team as to put together these commercials that have been playing on Cox channels all over Maricopa County over the last 2 months, showcasing the Arts District as well as the Museum of the West, and we're very thankful for that partnership. You know, we keep a guest book at the front desk, and these are some of the locations from people all over the world that have come to the Museum of the West. 6 of the 7 continents we have received guests from. We even got somebody up there from Greenland that showed up at the museum. So we know that we're covering a large expanse across the world. And we love being a participant of this tourism community. Another important component of growth for us is education. We believe strongly in bringing fifth grade history classes to our museum. And I set a goal with our Director of Education to get every fifth grade class in Maricopa County through the Museum of the West in the next 2 years. Because when they arrive and they showcase, and we showcase to them what the American West of their homeland is all about, they probably learned a lot more than they had in some of their history classes. So we're very grateful when they show up, and our goal is to get them all there over the next 2 years. We've won a lot of awards. Well, I'm sorry. We've won a lot of awards for environmental awards for our building, but we've also won a number of structural awards. We won the Distinguished Building Honor Award a couple of times over the last 15 years. It's an amazing event venue. We just like to remind people of that. We've had a number of city events there, but utilizing the destination management companies and some of our partnerships here with the city to come and do events at our museum have changed. We just had a funeral on Sunday, this past Sunday, of 300 people from one of the most famous artists, Ed Mell, who died recently at 81. He wanted to have his museum and told his wife that, and so our museum put on a celebration of life. So it has the capability of doing wonderful things for the event space. And by the end of this year, we feel 70 events will take place, close to over 200 people, and we'll double our event attendance over year. Some of the industry ratings that we have at the bottom there, but I think more importantly is the Western Week is such an important, iconic week each year, and this is the Hash Knife Pony Express trail ride that's come to the museum to deliver the mail to the mayor. We do it each year, and this is the picture from above. Just big crowds and a good remembrance of when the Old West meets the New West. And it's important that we have that Western Week every week here in Scottsdale, and we like to be a part of it here at the museum. Some more accolades that we feel very strongly about is that in August of last year, we were voted the #1 Western Museum in the United States by True West Magazine. In 2023, we were named the #1 museum in Scottsdale. But just recently, in the last 3 weeks, Visit the USA named us one of the top 16 museums in the United States. Around that picture right there is the pictures of the Getty, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Met in New York, and the Chicago Institute of Art. Those are museums of stature, and we are right there with them as one of the top 16. So our trail ahead is distinct. We know that we've had the expansion. We thank you so much for your vote to move forward on that. There's the groundbreaking in January. We now have received the Bassett collection as part of our new collection that will go in the expansion. And we're looking forward to having that showcased this fall. And so the trail ahead is very bright for all of us. And for me, to you, I want to say thank you so much for all your support.
Well, excellent, Todd. I will add that your community space is fast becoming a favorite of our community. I saw a fashion show, and as you said, the experienced Scottsdale people, our real estate people, they all enjoy and are fascinated by that backdrop. So kudos to you, and we will continue to grow with you and look forward to the ribbon cutting.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much.
Excellent. Okay, next on our agenda is during tonight's meeting, the council may make a motion to recess into executive session to obtain legal advice on any applicable item on the agenda. If authorized by the council, the executive session would be held immediately and would be closed to the public. The public would then resume following the executive session. Also, according to our council rules of procedure, citizens attending city council meetings shall observe the same rules of order and decorum applicable to members of the council and city staff. Unauthorized remarks or demonstrations from the audience, such as applause, stamping of feet, or other demonstrations would not be permitted. Violations of these rules could result in removal from the meeting by security staff or Sheriff Jack. Oh, wait, anyway. Public comment announcement. Public comment, we're moving on to an opportunity for Scottsdale citizens, residents, business owners, and or property owners to comment on non-agendized items that are within the council's jurisdiction. Advocacy for or against a candidate or a ballot measure during a council meeting is not allowed pursuant to state law and is therefore not deemed to be within the council's jurisdiction. No official action could be taken on any public comment. As you come forward, you're limited to 3 minutes, and if you wish to speak, you would have checked with the clerk. I'm told there are no requests from the public to speak. Therefore, I'm closing public comment. Next, we move on to the approval of the minutes, and I'm looking for a motion to approve regular meeting and work study session minutes of February 20th, 2024.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Please record your vote. Okay, we are unanimous. Next, we will move on to consent agenda items 1 through 13. Consent agenda items are fully informational with all the file and background information of record. Do council members have any questions on the consent agenda items? If so, you could cue in. Also, we have an opportunity for the public to address any consent agenda items. I'm told there's no request from the public, and I see no request from the council for more information. Therefore, I'm open to a motion.
Yep, Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve consent agenda items 1 through 13.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, please record your vote. Great. I do want to call attention to item number 8 on the consent agenda, which we just approved. It involves the Phase 1 funding for our fire department. That's the new ambulance service, and this would allow really enhanced service to our community and visitors. I see the chiefs are here, and I thank you very much for your presentation. With that, we will move on to regular agenda item number 14. Item number 14 is the Scottsdale Stadium Phase 2 Improvement Project Construction Phase Services Contract. Our presenter is Allison Timkew, City Engineer. Hello.
Hello. Good evening, Mayor, members of council. The agenda item you have before you tonight is item 14. It's the Construction Manager at Risk Construction Phase Services for the Scottsdale Stadium Phase 2 Improvements Project. Okay, the first slide is just a brief history of Phase 1 of the stadium project. Back in June of 2019, the baseball facilities agreement was extended for spring training through 2044. This was approved by council. The Phase 1 construction was approved by council in 2019, and Phase 1 was completed for spring training in 2020. So the Stadium Phase 2 project was originally intended to be completed in 2020, 2021, but as you know, with COVID and delays in lead times for equipment, some of our equipment, especially electrical equipment, had, I think, 80-month lead times for some of the construction materials. So that led to us assessing and evaluating the time frame and the priorities for the Phase 2 stadium project. So the Phase 2 stadium project timelines were revised to occur over 3 or more off-seasons. So if you recall, last year around this time, City Council authorized the first GMP with our contractor, and that was for the first base deck and the third base concession stands. That project was completed over the 2023 break after spring training and completed prior to the 2024 spring training season. So the 2024 project is tonight's proposal, and that's for the left field berm enhancements. So this diagram shows where those improvements are proposed to occur. So if you look at the diagram, the blue and the green area is where the construction improvements are going to occur. The left field berm day park area will create new amenities, better serving spring training and year-round use of the stadium facilities. A new permanent deck will be constructed on top of the berm with an elevator and stairs added for improved access. A covered area will be provided for shade and concessions. To maintain character of the original berm and to provide additional shade, existing trees will be salvaged and replanted and supplemental trees added. Below the platform, new restrooms will be added to increase capacity, provide accessible restrooms and storage for stadium use. And removable fencing will be installed to allow day access from drink water to this area when the stadium is not in use, so essentially become a day park for use, not during times when the stadium is in use. So the restroom portion of this project is going to be located under the elevated left field deck. And the reason why we have this agenda item on regular instead of consent is because we are requesting a transfer of $1.7 million from the tourism funds. And it's not an increase in scope or an increase in cost. Essentially, the restroom portion of the project would have been deferred to a future phase. But it's more cost-effective to build it at the same time as the deck. And since in February, the Tourism Commission did approve unanimously the transfer of state savings from, it was actually the Westworld Tent Project where we had savings. So the $1.7 million, the Tourism Commission unanimously voted to approve, to transfer that to this project. So that's what we're requesting tonight. This is a conceptual rendering of what the left field berm patio area will look like from above, and then the improvements as well to the left field berm. You see a lot of trees added for shade. This is what it looks like up on the left field berm patio, and you can see the shade in the back, and then trees added for shade. This is just another view that would show the shaded area where concessions would occur, and a final view that looks out onto the field. So again, the location of this is straight out in the left field where the existing berm is today. So tonight, we're asking for authorization of the contract for this portion of Phase 2. Construction would start April 1st of 2024 and continue through to winter of 2024. During the construction of the left field berm, the stadium could remain open, but the project is scheduled to be complete by February of 2025 prior to the spring training next year. So again, the request is for first, the authorization of the GMP number 2. Again, the first GMP was the the first base area improvements. And this is for the left berm improvements. And additionally, it includes the request of a general fund capital contingency budget appropriation transfer of up to $1.7 million to this project, funded by the Tourism Development Fund, and then the cash transfer as well of $1.7 million, from the Tourism Fund to the stadium renovations project. And with that, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Well, thank you. First of all, I'll mention that I am opening for public comment. Item number 14, the stadium Phase 2 improvements, and I'm told there is no public comment, therefore I will close public comment. I'll lead off by saying, you know, every season gets better and better, and the facilities with the right field shade element, it's very popular, and it's outstanding. It's an outstanding addition that now will be balanced with the other left field side. But I really do like the concept of the public park element. That also conforms with all our sustainability, additional trees, and enjoyment of outside space. So those are my comments. We'll move to Councilmember Graham, Vice Mayor Whitehead, and Councilwoman Janik.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Allison. Good presentation. Financially, this wasn't a bond project, right?
Councilmember Graham, correct, it's not a bond project.
And the overall budget, you said it's not over budget, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Was there any, when the Tourism Commission discussed this, was this their favorite idea to use you said there was savings from a Westworld project. Was this their favorite way to use that, or?
Councilmember Graham, I'm not sure, but I do know that a portion of the funds were also transferred to another project tonight on the consent agenda, item number 5.
Oh, good. Can you say a little more about that Westworld project that was under budget? Because we should celebrate that. That's a good thing, right?
Yes, Councilmember Graham, that is
Under budget,
good news.
and
It's
I'm
under
sure
budget.
I'm sure it was ahead of schedule too.
It's a Westworld tent project, and it was done, and again, in a very condensed time frame because it needed to be done over the fall months to be completed in time for Barrett-Jackson.
Did we just get like cheaper materials? It was just under budget, or
Just under budget, yes.
just under budget? No more. Okay, I'll take that. And then you said that the berm improvements and the restrooms, that those savings from the other project that were under budget are going to pay for this, right?
Councilmember Graham, that's correct. So the $1.7 million that we're transferring to this project from the tourism funds allows us to do the restroom construction at the same time as this left field berm and patio construction, which is a cost savings for us. It will be, because if not, we would come back and do it at a later date with the platform already built. So
yeah, we would jackhammer it now and then fill it in and jackhammer it later. So that's good. The one thing I was wondering is, did you guys want to do it at the same time, but just because fiscal constraints, you guys were forced? Was that the original intention or desire?
Councilmember Graham, so when we were looking at all the projects that encompass Phase 2 and the available funding, we broke it up into several phases, and
Okay.
yeah.
And so we were just simply able to accelerate it and
Correct.
combine it and get some
Cost savings.
very good. So that was my questions about that. And then I guess, can you just say just a little more about, because I've known about this project for several years. If you can go to like a rendering, the non-game time sort of public open space, is there, yeah, a rendering, maybe that was it?
So on this plan right here, you can kind of see it as the blue area. That's actually the actual left berm patio area. And then the green is the improvements to the existing berm. So it basically encompasses that area.
I guess what I'm struggling to conceptualize is what section, where is sort of the demarcation where it's going to be open space, you know, more of the time to residents?
This overhead view can show you basically the area that will be open.
So that's all going to be sort of expanded open space for
Correct.
year-round, except for spring training, obviously.
Correct.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a strong asset to the area. So, thank you, Allison.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Whitehead, then Councilwoman Janik.
Yeah, so I guess I agree with the mayor and Councilman Graham. Congratulations. It's always nice when things align and we have extra money. And I have to say, my first year on council, the first phase of this, it was tense. Are we doing the right thing? And I just cannot get over how much use we've had of this, of the improvements to the stadium. It's been wonderful. And also the public access to the stadium, because we have all kinds of events now where you don't just have to buy baseball tickets. So I'm very pleased, I'm very supportive. I know our city manager had a goal of having a park. This is in fact a new mini park, so congratulations on that. I'm thrilled. And I'm trying to pull it up. I would like to make a motion to, I guess I could let my other speak. Okay, well, I'm looking for my agenda, but I'll let the others speak, and then someone else can make a motion, because I'm very excited about this project. Thank you.
Councilwoman Janik, then Councilmember Durham.
Okay, thank you, Mayor, and I agree and concur with all the other comments. This is a wonderful addition to a part of town that I think needs this type of improvement and community involvement. Very, very nice job and a good presentation. I do have one question. Items 2 and 3 combined $3.4 million. Does that go towards the $9.156 million, or is that a separate expense item?
Okay, so Councilmember Janik, the GMP is the first item. That's the $9.1 million with the contractor. And then it's actually, we're adding $1.7 million. There's two items there, because one is for the budget appropriation and the other is for the actual cash.
Okay, say it one more time. I'm not sure. Are you subtracting out 1.7 million from 9.16?
We are adding $1.7 million to the project. Okay. And that will cover the guaranteed maximum price of $9.1 million.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Councilmember Durham, and then we'll go back to your motion.
Thank you, Mayor. Since this area is going to be open to the public, are there measures to prevent people from entering onto the field or other areas of the stadium during those hours when it's open to the public, but the stadium itself is closed?
Councilmember Durham, yes. The project includes removable fencing for that reason.
And that fencing's sufficiently high to keep people out?
Correct.
And you say it's removable? Will it?
Removable. So that it doesn't have to be in place while the spring training games are going on.
Okay, and then you'll put it up when they're over. Okay, all right, thank you.
Back to you, Vice Mayor.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Okay, I motion to adopt Resolution 13072, authorizing number 1, construction manager at risk contract amendment number 2023-125-COS-A1 in the amount of $9,156,723 between the city and Oakland Construction Company, Inc. for construction phase services for this Phase 2 guaranteed maximum price for the Scottsdale Stadium Phase 2 improvement project. And number 2, a FY 23-24 general fund capital contingency budget appropriation transfer of up to $1,700,000 to the Scottsdale Stadium renovation Phase 2 capital project to be funded by the Tourism Development Fund. And number 3, an FY 23-24 operating cash transfer of up to $1.7 million from the Tourism Development Fund to the Scottsdale Stadium renovations Phase 2 capital project.
Second. Second from Councilman Durham. I just will add, this is a real-time project. Basically, Scottsdale, the Giants vacate in April. They finish and the season begins, so it's very timely. All of the steel, all the contractors and subs are ready to just bring their first string players in there and contract and build this thing. So it'll be a great addition to our downtown. Please record your vote. Thank you. We are unanimous. Next, we have the opportunity for public comment, a second opportunity for public to come forward. I see that there were no requests from the public on non-agendized items. Therefore, I will close public comment. Moving on to citizen petition items, number 15. We, per charter, are open to receiving citizen petitions. The clerk tells me none were presented. Therefore, I will close the item 15, citizen petitions. Next, we will move on to our work study session. Work study sessions provide a less formal setting for the mayor and council to discuss specific topics with each other, and city staff to provide staff with an opportunity to receive direction from the council. The public input is welcome, and we continue to maximize the time for our council's consideration by having up to 5 speakers who can come forward. And I'm told we have 4 speakers who wish to speak on the topic. Therefore, we will proceed with the public comment and open public comment. As you come forward, please state your name and place of residence, and then we will begin with Ute Brady and James Davis. We're speaking on the topic of our Scottsdale Community Sustainability Plan. Thank you.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor Ortega, City Council members. My name is Dr. Ute Brady. I'm a longtime Scottsdale resident, and can you hear me okay?
That's better.
And I come before you in my role as the chair of the Scottsdale Environmental Advisory Commission, SEEK. SEEK unfortunately did not have an opportunity to discuss the strategies and actions, so my comments tonight will focus only on the draft targets. In the 3 chapters before you, there are a total of 19 proposed targets. Of these targets, 10 are jointly supported by staff and a majority of SEEK commissioners, not all unanimously. Included in the 19 are also 4 SEEK proposed targets, 3 of which are now jointly recommended. I understand that one of the reasons City Council wants to get this plan finished is out of concern that Scottsdale is getting a late start compared to other cities. I want to emphasize that in many of the 9 targets in which SEEK's recommendations vary from staff's, SEEK's recommendations largely echo those found in other Arizona municipalities. So by accepting the SEEK recommended targets, City Council would in essence facilitate Scottsdale catching up to be on par with other cities. Closing this gap would have a very real and practical consequence. The city would be more eligible for sustainability grants and other funding sources. In instances where the SEEK recommended targets may be different from other cities, for example in the target dates, it is important to note that most cities began developing their plans 5 or 10 years ago, when 2050 was an appropriate target date based on recommendations provided by the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC. But the IPCC no longer supports 2050 as an appropriate target date, and in fact, as of last year, it announced that greenhouse gas emissions can peak no later than 2025 to keep global temperatures from surpassing a critical threshold. That means emissions cannot continue to grow. The IPCC called on more affluent nations and cities to be on an accelerated agenda and move their carbon-free goals as close as possible to 2040. Since all systems are interconnected, this accelerated timeline applies to all sustainability-related targets. More trees and shade, more waste diversion, and cleaner energy are all necessary in combination to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and put us on a less precarious path to the future. The targets advanced by staff tend to be conservative and are designed to be easily reached. Unfortunately, I don't think we have the luxury to act when it's affordable or convenient anymore. We can either pay now or pay more later. City Council has the opportunity to prevent further declines in environmental conditions and greater risks to our citizens and economy by being more proactive now. SEEK's goals are well aligned with other cities and comport with the guidance provided by the IPCC. I strongly encourage you to support our targets. Thank you for your kind consideration.
Thank you. Next, we have James Davis and Patricia Badnock and Shelley Gordon.
Mr. Mayor, can we ask questions of witnesses?
What we'll do is we'll respond after all speakers are coming forward. So, excuse me? Okay. Excuse me. Thank you.
So I can ask later?
Well, we could call him back as an expert. I think what we'll do is just see what, let's handle all the public comment first, and then we'll respond by calling them back. So thank you. I'll bring Ute back. Thank you. James Davis, and then Patricia Badnock. James isn't here. Okay, Patricia Badnock, hello.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Patty Badnock, a 50-year resident of Scottsdale. Scottsdale's Community Sustainability Plan purpose, it says, to lend support to our GP 2035 to strengthen the commitment to a more sustainable, resilient, and thriving future. What the heck does that mean? To shore up what we already have caused, or to further the ability to accommodate further development? To ban, the draft continues, banning, or to use another term meaning the same thing, to curse. This draft suggests to repeat cursing fossil fuels like coal, gas, etc., until you reach the critical mass needed to ban it altogether. Direction, this information continues. By addressing these issues, we will produce cleaner air and health benefits. We therefore need to ban fossil fuels because they emit heat-trapping, pollution-forming, and I quote, a thick blanket around the earth causing irreversible damage. That's a gross exaggeration to support the position, but scare tactics work. Even if true, the rest of the planet's gross abuse of not adhering to this principle completely makes these efforts ineffective. So I question, what is the objective? The increased number of green buildings may be of benefit. However, building less actually would provide even greener benefits. The heat sink factor, it is greater in South Scottsdale than in the north. The controversy between north and south exists even in Scottsdale. In this case, the complaints I hear is that height and density projects are greater in the south intentionally to provide more open space for the north. However, there is a change brewing, and the north doesn't like it either. So plant more trees. I like that idea. Is there any talk within this so-called sustainability about population curtailment, or instead of just containment? More people, greater the growth, greater the crime, greater the traffic, greater the lack of water, greater the pollution. No, this extreme draft only suggests how we can sustain our population explosion by curtailing our basic fundamental freedoms, like driving our cars or having a real green grass lawn. It has been recently noted that the fake grass emits more heat than gravel, but I digress. No, this sustainability draft is nothing more than a Trojan horse to forward your management's agenda to build, 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 and feed the monster. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Shelley Gordon. I don't believe Shelley Gordon is here, nor James Davis. With that, we will close public comment. I did see a request from Councilmember Graham asking Ute Brady a question, so if you could please come forward. Thank you so much for your service.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Uta. What were you, can you just say, I was writing, but I couldn't write fast enough. What were you saying about the United Nations climate action goals, or you were talking about a subcommittee or something like that?
You mean the UN's international panel on, the panel on climate change, the IPCC? Is that who you're referencing?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So what did they say about if we don't act? What were you saying about that?
They're the ones that originally made the recommendations for the 2050 deadline to get to net zero. And mainly their guidance is directed at more affluent countries in the global north, those who are polluting more and also have more money to take action. And so they recently revised their report in 2023 based on the assessments of how global greenhouse gas emissions have been performing, and they now no longer think that 2050 is an appropriate goal because we are still increasing the emissions. And in order to stay within, so the temperatures don't increase over the critical threshold, we need to up the actions and do it quicker.
What are some of the most effective ways they suggest, cracking down?
There are a variety of strategies that they advance. Planting trees is one of them. Public transportation is another one. Electric cars. There's a variety of strategies that they offer in their suggestions for policymakers.
And they think they think the climate scenario requires greater action, accelerated time frame.
A more accelerated time frame,
Okay.
yes.
And do you agree with their prognosis and their prescriptions?
I am not a climate scientist, but I do think that based on the data, with the temperatures increasing, and we've experienced it here firsthand, that the summers are getting hotter, the nights are hotter, and the drought.
Okay.
So I think we would be wise to heed their guidance.
Okay. Uda, thank you for taking my questions and for your service on SEEK.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Janik, perhaps you could stay there for a minute. I may have a question too. Go ahead.
This is not a question for Uda, it's just a comment. I don't think it's wise for anybody, when they get up to speak, to pit the north part of the city against the south part of the city. That is not what we're about. We work together for the benefit of all. So I would hope that we don't have too many more of those comments. Thank you.
Okay. I have a comment specifically about the 2050 concept. And for instance, and perhaps we could clarify it with you as well, Ute, for a second. But I'll just comment this way. The city does not flip a switch and order nuclear power, nuclear electricity, or fossil fuel. Those decisions, or even hydroelectrics, there's a small percent coming through Salt River Project. We just flip the switch and expect wherever the provider is that we will have lights in an emergency or needs in our schools and so forth. The observation that I have is that, for instance, Salt River Project has a goal of 2050 to be more neutral. And so they are a provider to the city. So my observation is we cannot have a goal that's accelerated more than what the provider will provide. That's just doesn't make sense to me. We could shake and rattle and push or believe that, but if the source has that goal and that objective and they're executing to meet that goal, it's just a bit of a reach for us to say we can make that more ambitious. Vice Mayor Whitehead, just at this point, we're just going to go on comments and we'll get into the presentation. Go ahead.
I'll just be quick. I'll just thank Dr. Brady for speaking. And I do think that there is, and I appreciate the work of SEEK and all the studying and research you've done to try to advance this. And yeah, city governments do have limits. We've done, and it's to address what the mayor just said, it's our green building codes, the things that we can do to reduce the power we use. That's how we can get there as well. But I'm glad that the power companies also have some aggressive goals. So that's it. Just wanted to thank you and SEEK.
So at this point, we will proceed with the presentation. Just to recap, there were 2 other chapters which were covered in a work study, and we're approaching the 3 other topics. Thank you very much. Ms. Neely, Ms. Lisa McNeely will give us a presentation.
Good evening, Mayor Ortega, council members. Thank you for the opportunity to provide another update on the Community Sustainability Plan. I think this is the earliest I've started a work study session, so, but I'm really glad to share these remaining draft sections of the plan with you. In November, you gave very valuable direction. Confirming the new framework, and the overarching story, and some of the proposed targets in the air quality and water sections. Is there a trick to making this move? Did I do that or did you do that? Can you advance it one more time? Oh, yeah. So, tonight we're going to be looking at 3 more areas, sort of increasing the use of renewable energy and energy efficiency, creating less waste and keeping it out of the landfill, and preparing for extreme heat. As you've heard, the Scottsdale Environmental Advisory Commission, I'll call them the commission moving forward, has really just been hand in hand with staff in this plan development, sharing their input on multiple different drafts. They've held 5 meetings since the last work study session, including an additional special meeting, and have extensively reviewed what we have here. And this plan also reflects staff from other departments. Dave Bennett and Gina Azama from the Solid Waste Services are here, and and they've been front and center on the solid waste chapter. Can I, really, I'm going to need to tell you to advance? Is that what we'll do? Okay, there we go. So before we start, I want to take a minute with this fairly boring slide to review how the draft targets were developed. So in general, we've been spending the last 9 months gathering baseline data, sort of these indicators where we are today, and then have been working to develop targets where we want to be, our vision for the future for Scottsdale. We've worked to try to develop targets that are achievable and measurable. We heard you in November. And what you're going to see is that we're trying to balance accountability and control over outcome. We've already heard some of that conversation today, but also on balancing that achievability and ambition. This latter point is going to be really important as we go through these next chapters. As we've already heard, we're hoping to set some longer term goals, 20 or more years in the future. There was a lot of agreement on maybe where we could get in the short term, often by looking at trends in the data. But for these longer term goals, I hope that you can look at them as being aspirational or visionary. This is the future we want for Scottsdale. Try not to think of them as unachievable, but as rather ones where maybe we still need to work on what that path is to get us there. I really want to stress that these targets are not caps on activity or individuals. There's no penalties to a business or to anybody for not achieving them. And these are not mandates. Instead, we're asking residents and businesses to join us on this path as we move forward. And also want to make sure, and you may hear me say this multiple times, we've committed to update this plan every 3 years, so we can sort of look to move forward. Next slide. So I'm going to start just giving some highlights, sharing some of that baseline data, that where we are today then we'll move into the targets, and there'll be plenty of time. I'll be watching. If I'm going too fast, I know you'll stop me. So next slide. 2023 was hot. We set a lot of records regionally, both for the hottest July and unfortunately the most heat-related fatalities here in Maricopa County. This data that we've pulled from NOAA shows how much longer and hotter our summers are becoming. The top graph is Scottsdale-specific data that looks at average July temperatures, and you can see the trends in both the high temperatures and then on the right, how the low temperatures are how it's staying hotter at night. The bottom table adds some additional information on the increasing number of extremely hot days. Makes sense, the average is going up, the number's getting higher, but this is looking at how much longer our heat season is getting. And when you compare sort of recent averages to older ones, we're seeing 5 to 8 days more of extreme heat. We know heat impacts human health. We know it impacts quality of life, economic vitality if people aren't out walking around. And even there was an article in the paper this week about the impact to our iconic saguaro cacti. Next slide. So those last data tables were air temperatures. That's what we see on our iPhone when we look up the weather. We also have some data on surface temperatures. This is, the temperature of that highest surface, whether it's the road or a top of a building. And we can see this allows us to look at how the temperatures vary around the city. That rain can vary substantially, and we know that some areas are on average at least 10 degrees higher than the average for the city. We can see the preserve, we can see the Indian Bend Wash in here. This is a helpful tool as we work to move as we work on this plan. Next slide. We also wanted to make sure, and if I can use the Elmo here too. Can you zoom in? Can you zoom in, or do I need to know how to do that? Perfect. So when we look at the heat-related illnesses, we know heat impacts our ability to cool ourselves. We know some people are more vulnerable, young children, older residents, just the heat impacts us more. When we look at data around comparing Scottsdale to Maricopa County, we see that often we have fewer of those illnesses and fatalities, but it is still high. This table just differs slightly from what's in your packet. I was able to get additional data from the Maricopa County Department of Health that looks at the totals. So those fractions are the number of residents per 100,000 population, and that allows us to look, compare ourselves maybe to Maricopa County. The totals are in parentheses, and so you can see that fatalities have been fairly high. Preliminary data for 2023 for Scottsdale shows that there were 17 fatalities this past summer. Next slide. One of the main ways that we can reduce heat is through shade and cooler surfaces. This reduces the mean radiant temperature, so this is a third way of looking at it. This is that heat load on the human body. This is what we feel when we're not in the shade. We know that shade can reduce that mean radiant temperature by 30 to 55 degrees, and we know how important it is. This is data from the Cooler Scottsdale study that we presented on before that shows that 13% of Scottsdale is covered in trees and shade. And you can see, again, you can pick out, where's the preserve, where's the Indian Bend Wash on this, and so we see some of those connections. So if there's no questions, or if I'll stop and see if there are questions, I can move on to targets. Okay, next slide. So we do want to walk through these targets one at a time. For the first two that you'll see, as Chair Brady mentioned, these are ones where staff and commission supported each other on this. On the left, you see a repeat of that baseline data. This shows those average airtime temperatures in July, and the right are the targets that we've included in the plan. So for the temperature targets, these are to reduce air and surface temperatures We framed these very similarly to a target that we discussed in November for air quality, where we made it time-bound but did not actually quantify the reduction. Next slide. In a similar manner, we have a target, a health-related target looking at reducing the hospitalizations. Again, this is time-bound, but not a particular reduction. Next slide. So the layout for this one is a little bit different. This is one where we have both a staff recommendation on the left, a SEEK recommendation on the top right, and where I've just underlined in red the differences between the two. We still do have the indicator data on the bottom, just as a reminder for where we are. So again, we're at 13% for tree canopy. The staff recommended target really relied on insights from the American Forest, which talked about 15% as being a realistic baseline target for desert cities. We know that the commission was really interested in the role of trees for shade and air quality, and so are recommending that we go further and faster on this canopy. So
Let's stop right here, and
Yeah.
we'll get some comment from council and direction. Councilwoman Janik, and then Vice Mayor Whitehead.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Lisa. I have a question or a comment on what was originally page 84, but is now your page 5. And it's not the page. It's the page where you have your indicator for average temperature July 2023, and there are 2 targets.
That one.
Yes, thank you. I think it would be nice if we had a placeholder for the indicator for the second target. I know we don't have the data quite yet, but if we could just put a box there and label it to be determined, TBD. That way we know that there are 2 targets and we're looking for some additional data.
We can probably find a way to provide that. So we had that surface temperature I showed it graphically in the plan, but we do have average temperatures for those that I can include.
The surface temperatures?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you. And then I think it's interesting, it's just a comment that we have 3 growth areas, and I'll be darned if our 3 growth areas aren't the hottest areas. And that is a conundrum that I think we really need to try to figure out what we need to do with it. I don't think it's a real good look for the city to continue to grow where we have the biggest heat islands. So that's just kind of a comment. Then I had one other comment, which was, it's my page 90, and I think it's your page 11.
So we haven't reached 11 yet. I think we're up to 10. So,
Okay.
So
We did stop at number 11,
just did that
Mayor
one?
Ortega,
Okay.
yes.
I'm sorry. So we have a comment on 9 and 10, and now we're at 11. Go ahead, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor, that's okay. If you look at the reference for the first indicator, percentage of tree and shrub canopy, it's a 2015 reference at 13%, and we're only going up by 2% for 2040. For me, I think we could have a more aggressive target on that, and the target I have is to increase tree and shrub canopy to 20% by 2030 and 25% by 2040. And I definitely, okay, 2040.
So you would agree
Okay.
with the SEEK recommendation, was your comment?
Yes, on that one. And then, just to keep looking at the other target, which is the structured shade citywide by 15% by 2030. I think those are good targets. And if there's any way we could get the data on where we are now, I think that would be good.
So I haven't talked about that one. Would you like me?
That might be number 12.
Okay.
So at this point, let's, thank you very much. Is there,
No, that's good, thank you.
Sure. Councilmember Durham and Councilmember Graham.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm concerned about the tree and shrub canopy targets for a couple of reasons. Number one is, I think the statistic you cited says that sort of the natural coverage in the desert is 15%. Is it?
The American Forest called it a realistic baseline target for cities, knowing that other cities, say back east, have a much higher expectation of ability to add trees.
Yeah, I just don't know how much, given that we live in a desert, I'm not sure how far we can press that. And the second thing that concerned me about that, and we talked about this last week, is the amount of water that it takes to get a tree started. And I realize that once a tree is started and is on its way and growing, that there should be sufficient water for a shrub or a tree to continue once it's going. But in those first 3 years, I'm just concerned about how much water and maintenance would be needed if we were going to reach something like 20 or 25%. That I don't know the answer to that, but I'm just concerned about how much it would take our water resources to reach those levels. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Graham and then myself.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with colleague Councilmember Durham on the tree canopy because I definitely like, Seek Chair Dr. Brady said, they recommend planting more trees and more canopy. When the desert baseline is at 15%, is that an accurate number?
There's.
You don't know. You're not sure. Okay. I would love to see more trees. I mean, the water concern. I think there's an offset because you find desert trees, indigenous to here, to the Sonoran Desert, and then in theory they drink less water, and then they're anti-heat islands, so they make it cooler. So I think there is some offset there. I think this is all incremental, but I just think about that does seem like a Herculean effort. Seek's recommendation. The other thing I was going to say was one more comment is you have to wonder about Councilmember Janik's comment about the heat is hotter. The hots are getting hotter in our growth areas, and so is the heat. You talk about it's hotter. Is the heat going up faster because of more heat retention surfaces? I've heard a lot about we're humming. Everybody's AC units humming. Got a lot of heat, a lot of hot air. The hot air is just not from this dais, okay?
For the record, I did not say that.
You didn't say it, but you didn't dispute it. So would you say that, and this is going to be kind of an A or B for you. Would you say that, wider climate stuff has to do with the increase in temperature, or is it the development, the stuff that we can control, and that, there's less open space and grass and green space, and we have, like I said, more AC units humming. So which one contributes more?
That's a great question. I know you asked for A or B, but I don't tend to look at it that way. I look at it as the temperatures we looked at are surface temperatures, and so if we have darker surfaces, they are going to be hotter.
You see why I'm asking it, because if it's wider climate, we just don't have as much control over that than than the stuff that we're doing here and now. And so it seems more actionable if it was saying, well, it's, all these AC units are humming and these surfaces were,
But, so I think I better understand your question. Thank you.
Yeah, so just
Councilmember
ponder
Graham.
it, and I'll turn it back to the mayor. Thank you, Lisa.
I think the areas where we have control is if we shade those darker surfaces, then we can keep them cooler. If we have more energy efficient houses, then those ACs won't have to hum as much to keep people comfortable indoors. And so
Right.
those are areas then where we do still have control over what that outcome is.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, just a couple general comments, and I would also look at the ambitious route on page 11, going the 20% and 25%. Now, we have to clarify this. We cannot plant trees in the preserve. We cannot plant bushes in the preserve, so that 57 square miles is excluded from this formula here. Now, where can we plant? And those are indigenous plants. They're not groomed. They're not single trunk. They're multi-stem. They're basically like an umbrella of growth. And, the Sonora Palo Verde grows like a bush, but it's a tree and it's tall and so forth. So it creates an ecosystem, and it should be balanced with whatever the rainfall that happens. So the signature, the heat signature that we see in Scottsdale is basically the spine of the Greenbelt, and where we have built and allowed, there's been a generational shift in many trees when there were a lot of eucalyptus planted or a lot of mulberries planted, and trees that were not necessarily indigenous or tuned in as, say, Aleppos or even pistachio trees. So that heat signature is where we can do better work, right? That's where we cohabitate in our park areas and so forth. And so I think it's not too ambitious to say that where we do have the built environment, or where we do groom our trees and our arborists can handle that. I'm really impressed by all the trees that were planted in the medians on Hayden. And I'm thinking, in 15 years, it's going to be an amazing canopy right there of trees. So even after 10 years. So that will continue to improve. So my direction would be to look at the ambitious target, but remember, that's where we have growth going on. That means where commercial or housing is being reconstructed because it's already 30 years old or 40 years old. And certainly those trees may have expired, and we want to encourage more of that. Vice Mayor Whitehead, Councilwoman Janik, and then Councilwoman Caputi.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to get on the shade, but I also, and I know it's coming up, I think it's really important, the question about how do we reduce heat. We had a presentation a while ago about a state program through the county that retrofits low-income housing. And that's a key part of reducing heat, because again, if these houses are leaking the little bit of AC that they have on, it's not good for us. So I just want to point out there are a lot of ways to reduce heat, and we'll get to that later. On the trees, I favor, this is the one area where I really favor SEEK's recommendation. I do want to talk about Councilman Durham's concern about the water. If we have roots in the ground, initially, you do have to water the trees, and it's always a shame when we allow mature trees to come down. But once those trees are mature, those roots are catching the water. They're bringing in more water into our soil. So, and the fact that the shade is just part of it, they're actually cooling the air. So I think a more aggressive target I'd support that. I'm not going to not support the plan if the rest of my colleagues want to stick with 15%, but we know this is something that works, and we even heard Ms. Badenoch say she likes trees. It's something that does unite this community, and there's no punishment for not making it, but we've seen a lot of excuses for trees coming down in this town. I'd like to see targets that encourage people not to bring down the trees. Oh, one more comment on the growth areas. Yes, they're hot. The built environment's hot, the desert's not. We know that, and that's why the building codes were so important, and that's why it's important to have trees. And one of the things we've done versus what we saw a lot in the 2010s is we are adding open space in our growth areas because we recognized that downtown was one of the hottest quadrants. The northwest part of our city, or I guess now it's central, the 101, it is hot. So that's why we've been negotiating parks and open space in these areas. Thanks.
Let me go to Councilwoman Caputi and Littlefield, and then get back to Councilwoman Janik. Councilwoman Caputi, and then Councilwoman Littlefield.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a kind of overall comment, and then I had a question. I just wanted to remind everyone as we walk through this, and we talked about it in our private meeting together too, this is an aspirational plan, and I thought you did a good job of reminding folks there's no mandates, these are recommendations, and we're trying to make a leadership position that we're trying to make sustainability something that's important to the city, and we're saying that, and we're going to start going through and talking about 20%, 25%, 15%, 10%. I mean, these are aspirational goals. As you said, we're not putting on burdensome regulations or mandates. We're simply making requests that people step up and kind of do the right thing. So on that page where you had the two targets, reduce day and nighttime air temperatures by 2030 and then reduce the surface temperatures in our growth areas, I mean, I would say why not both, right? Again, we're trying to do the right thing. Those both seem like great goals to me. And of course there's more heat in our growth areas. That's where we have concentrated our economic activity on purpose, as was pointed out, so that we can have huge parts of our city that are open and undeveloped and don't have all of that activity. We've made a conscious effort to make sure that we have those three growth areas. Of course we're going to have more heat there. Sure, the solution to that would be to get rid of everything, but that, we have to run our city. So I think both of those goals are actually wonderful aspirational things to work towards, and I would recommend that we leave them both in there. And again, as we work through this, I would encourage folks to not get lost in are we going to do 15, are we going to do 18, are we going to do 20? The idea of having a sustainability plan is a great idea. It's aspirational. It puts us on a target towards being better as a city, and let's go through it. Right. Thank you.
Can I just respond? Thank you for letting me clarify. The recommendation is to have both in there, so thank you. Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Councilwoman Littlefield, and then back to Councilwoman Janik.
Thank you, Mayor. I have been extremely impressed with what you have put together. And when I talked to our commission members and visited with them, I'm impressed with them also. For one thing, it seems to me that by and large, you guys are walking down the same path. And you're going for the same goal, the same end. You may have different dates, you may have something over here different than this tweak over here, but we're talking years here, people. We're not talking about what we want to do in 2 weeks. So we don't know what we're going to look like moving forward in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. Are we going to be in a drought still? Are we going to be having the same problems? How many people are we going to have in Scottsdale? We don't know. What are the road requirements going to be? And what is the climate going to be? Are we going to have a change, a continuous change, or is it going to come back? A lot of things are going to be different 30 years from now. And I think I would suggest very heartily that you continue the two groups that are here. You're both so knowledgeable and you know so much about this and how to fix some of these issues. You need to work together. Whether or not you're looking at this and saying, oh, we need to do this by 2030. No, we need to do this by 2031. I don't care right now. What I want to know is, what is this? And that's what we all want to know, and that's what we all want to focus on. I have a couple of notes. Support the commission. You and they are not adversarial. You're working together for the same goal and the same purpose. And I think that that's very, very important because you bring expertise from many different angles and different viewpoints, and together you are stronger. So I think that's good. Water and tree maintenance. I don't know anybody who lives in the desert that doesn't love trees, okay? It just doesn't happen. But we do have to be careful of our water usage. And drip lines, all of the things that we can use to conserve water and still keep the trees alive, we ought to look at that. We don't know how long this is going to last, this drought. We don't know how deep it's going to be, and we need to tread carefully. Our water is precious, and, you know, we have ways of planting trees that don't depend on hoses. So let's work on it, and let's see what we come up with. I think we need to be careful with the water usage, and that has to be top priority. We don't know how much water we're going to have 15 years from now. Regular reviews together as we move forward on all of these different areas. I talked to you, Lisa, and I talked to the commission, and I got a very interesting comment from the commission member I talked to. There's really not much difference between the SEEK recommended and the staff recommended citywide greenhouse gas emission targets. The target listed should not be there. It's like we're all working together. We're all going in the same direction. Let's keep that up. That's how we're going to achieve what we want to achieve. No infighting. Be focused on water usage in the future. That we pretty much know, at least for the next few years, we're going to be tight. We don't know how long this drought's going to last. We don't know how severe it's going to be. But we do know it's going to last for probably quite a while. Regular reviews as to where we are, work with the commission, work with our water department. They have some really good ideas on how to make the maximum use of our water going forward. As we move along on this timeline, I really, really heartily suggest meetings with all of you, the commission and the city, and agree on ways to go forward and to accomplish our goals. I was told by the commission, you're not that far apart. You really aren't. You're working the same way. You're doing the same things. And I find that extremely positive, and I find that something we need to continue on. I had one note that as I read through all of this, and I was kind of looking for it, and I didn't see it. So I'm just going to throw something out. You do with it as you will. I have regarding solar usage in the future. And there was nothing that I found, and maybe I just missed it because I was reading this kind of late at night. But there was nothing in there regarding solar in our water campuses and plants, in the plant's power system. And a target action could be one that would place solar in all of our water campuses as an energy means. And I don't
And if
know
I could
that's
add-
possible, but I think it's a cool idea. Thank you.
So if I would add to that, that's perhaps electricity related, and that's another section. And at this point, we have 2 slides remaining on extreme heat, so I'd like to present those
Yeah.
slides.
Can we get the slides back?
Then you'd at least see the last 3 of this one topic. And then I have Councilwoman Janik, Councilmember Graham. So
Okay.
we're very close to concluding this chapter. Right?
Yes, and so this is the last, oh, can we advance the slide? So the last area that came up was structured shade. So this is shade that's man-made. This might be a bus stop, this might be an overhang. And this came up sort of late, and so it's not one where we have any data yet. It's actually, there's not necessarily, there's not many models out there for how to even sort of measure it and define it. And so staff fully supports the idea of increasing structured shade. It is, but we were just asking to defer setting a target until we completed the shade and tree plan, which is where we have consultants who will be helping us get that data. So it's just, there are potentially multiple ways to define structured shade, and we just weren't sure what we had and wanted to ask for deferral. And again, hoping we can also, before we leave this chapter, see if we've got kind of consensus direction on the last target as well.
So just continue with the next two slides, and we'll comment. The one regarding strategies and actions
Yeah.
and implementation tools, that's the conclusion of this chapter.
Yeah.
We'll comment on the slide.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you advance to, so for each of the sections, we have strategies and actions that are going to be how we reach the targets. So examples from extreme heat are things like, looking for ways to improve proper tree maintenance, both, across our city, or expanding how we communicate about the location of the cooling centers. If you advance it, next slide. So with each of those as well, there's an implementation table where we repeat the strategies and actions. We reviewed this in November, but this lists the actions, details about timing, cost, and benefits, and really, I think, starts to answer a little bit of how we're going to do that. It's hard to put all of that in a plan when we're especially trying to look so broadly and so far out into the future. And so that's the rest of my slides, and hoping, yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so going to Councilwoman Janik and then Councilmember Graham on this extreme heat topic.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Lisa. I know that there are concerns about what is involved in planting a tree and growing that tree, and we have a lot of concerns about water. And I have a study by the Nature Conservancy, Economic Assessment of Heat in the Phoenix metro area, and it evaluates all of those costs, and it comes up with a huge cost benefit for planting trees. It does include the cost of water in the desert, because it's Phoenix Metro. And again, it's from the Nature Conservancy. I don't want to bore you by reading it to you, but I would strongly encourage all of us to reference it, because it shows huge benefit in many of the areas, morbidity, mortality, temperatures, and includes all of those in the various aspects of the cost benefit. So we're definitely on the right track. Thank you. And then the other comment I wanted to make has to do with the action plan, and I believe it's your page 11. And I was going to suggest that we add a heat 4.6. It's not 11, keep going.
You can use the Elmo.
And while you're looking at it, it's got to do with your implementation. And I would recommend that under heat, we add a 4.6, that we make sure that we plant these trees in an appropriate location to accommodate their future growth. So that we don't just put trees willy-nilly, not that we would, but we say, well, they're small, it'll work, but let's make sure we accommodate for future growth, and that when we place those trees, they will have the ability to mature and give us all the benefits we want. So it would be 4.6, and add that one addition. And I don't know if it needs to go in any of the ordinances or the building plans, but I think it's an important consideration. Thank you.
I think you meant to use the term mature spacing.
Yes.
So that, when it
Yes.
grows, it won't be crowding each other.
Thank you, Mayor.
And Councilmember Graham?
Very briefly, Sikh Commissioner Elisa McMahon, she sent what she thought were 5 errors. Did you receive that, Lisa?
In the plan?
Yes.
Those were corrected in the updated
Okay,
packet.
those are incorporated in here?
They were all in there were 4 that needed to be corrected. 1 was not, but they're all in the energy section.
Thank you.
Okay, Vice Mayor Whitehead?
I just thought it would be a good time to poll, and I would say just for myself that I support the SEEK recommendation for the tree canopy, and I appreciate Councilwoman Janik's data from the Nature Conservancy, but I support the staff recommendation on physical shade structure. And I just thought it'd be nice to see where our council stands so we can move on to the next section. Do you want to start with Councilwoman Caputi?
Okay, then my only conclusion. So, do you need- Well, I think we were, sorry, I think we covered, well, excuse me, we were at one conclusion, which was 12, saying regarding the shade, excuse me, structured shade.
Yes, so I combined the two. I said that, I just want to see where we're at. I'm for the SEEK recommendation.
Microphone.
I'm sorry, SEEK recommendation on tree canopy and staff recommendation on the structured shade. I just wanted to give some feedback to Lisa as to where this council is.
Okay, I believe we
Yeah.
gave positive feedback on shrub, tree and shrub.
Okay.
So that one's done. And now we're looking at the, and I might speak to that a little bit. So they're saying we don't necessarily have definition on it. I can tell you as an architect that when houses face north-south, they're probably 10% more energy efficient than east-west. It's a killer, right? So orientation alone is an important architectural feature. Frankly, if I prefer to eliminate west windows and even east windows, unless they're very heavily shaded or with a canopy. But again, those are things that we'll look at in the future, and that's why it was left open-ended in terms of the final comment is this is a cohesive plan. You've got the public sector, that's us, our responsibility on our public parks and our public ways, and then the private sector. But so the city staff will be thinking, how can we fit more trees in that work and are for the public good? And that's a good thing. And also the private sector will be looking at it in the same way. And I think that's why we're in it together. I think we're ready to move on to the waste portion. We only have 38 pages more, and we'll get there. This is fun. I like this.
Mayor, you didn't want to do council member or vice mayor's suggestion?
Well, I thought we already had a nod on the subject, and this at the present. Oh, we don't?
No.
Okay.
No.
Let's repeat that again, and I thought we had...
Can you go back to slide 11 just so it's up?
Maybe just start, Councilwoman Caputi, two targets. We've got tree target and physical shade target. So SEEK or staff?
I'm happy to support the targets on, again, more shade is always better. And as I said to begin with, I love aspirational targets. Sure, let's try. You know,
So
we can't
SEEK?
force it to happen. I'm very happy to try.
So SEEK on the trees? Is that, there's SEEK and then there's staff?
Sure, those sound
Okay,
great.
so, and then, okay, so, and I just to clarify, I was SEEK on the trees and staff on the shade. Councilwoman Janik?
Agree with Council Vice President.
That too.
We didn't know she was going to be nominated. I agree with what Councilwoman Whitehead said. The SEEK target for tree and shrub, and your recommendation, Lisa, on structured shade. Thank you.
Councilwoman Littlefield?
I agree with that also, but I do think that there needs to be intermediate review
Oh, yeah, we're
with
gonna have
both
that.
groups. Yeah.
We're going to have that.
I see. Yes, let's just have a match.
Okay.
You know where I stand. Councilwoman Durham Graham.
Excuse me, that's fine with me. My question was sort of a cost-benefit analysis of doing that many more trees, but Councilmember Janik has some evidence that supports that, and that was what my questions related to. So I'm fine with both of those.
I would support staff. I'd prefer to get the shade study. I have more information. I wish we agreed on more information, and information was more clear. But that's where I stand. Thank you.
Thank you. So if you can advance to
Thank
the
you.
waste, keep going. There we go.
Okay, so moving on to waste.
So I don't think I have to talk too much about why solid waste is important and how we manage that waste is important. You know, it's a chance to save money, to save landfill fees, and, you know, as Annie Leonard said in the Creator Story of Stuff, when we throw anything away, it must go somewhere. I do want to take a note and explain, because some of the targets here start getting a little complicated. Some of that's driven by the fact that we have multiple providers of solid waste services in the city. Scottsdale Solid Waste Services picks up for single-family households plus a few commercial accounts. We have private haulers who take in a lot of the rest. As a result, we've got great data on single-family households. We have very little on those private haulers. And what that's meant is, as a result, you'll see that more of the short-term targets focus on single-family households, and that then you'll see sometimes just longer-term targets citywide on the assumption that we will eventually have access to that data and be able to talk about that. So in fiscal year 23, you know, the amount of waste and recycling that Scottsdale Solid Waste collected was 10% less than in 2009. When you look at that waste per household, the reduction's even greater. It's down 13%. Municipal waste data is unfortunately one of those areas where we have very little data as well. Those buildings are picked up by solid waste services, but on the same routes as other places, and so we don't have that data yet. Dave Bennett and Gina Azamo will be starting to do some building-by-building audits this year so that moving forward we will have that data. So next slide. Another way to look at waste is not just what we send to the landfill, it's those diversion rates. This is that recycling or composting or even donations and in reuse. Again, single-family homes in fiscal year 23 had a diversion rate of 27%. This is dividing what was collected in the mauve bins by the mauve bins plus the black bins. And that's been stable for several years. Next slide. There's also just lots of other aspects to diversion. There's in ways that we keep waste out of the landfill and put it to better uses. Organic material is one way, whether that's food waste or yard waste. It's a great opportunity for diversion. This is a figure from the state of Oregon that really looks at sort of some of those hierarchies. It sort of takes reduce, reuse, recycle and makes it, you know, even sort of more, shares more information. Next slide. So I'm going to go through the targets one by one. So we have 3 different landfill waste targets, starting with this one, which is just for single-family households. Again, there's a couple of differences here, noticing the ones that we put underlined in red. You know, staff, there's an agreement about the short term, how much we can reduce waste by 2030. This is especially given the impact of the new transfer station. Where we're looking at that 90% reduction, which is what other cities call zero waste, but it's really a 90% reduction, as to whether, again, this is a 2040 or a 2050 timeline. You're going to see that choice often, and maybe as we move forward, if we get direction on sort of which one we're wanting to do, we can, you know, move through some of these other ones more. But we do know that there are technology improvements that are expected to drive costs down. So we know that achieving that 90% in 2050 won't be as difficult as it might be today. One other issue is terminology of waste versus refuse, where waste is language in the general plan terminology, which is what staff asks to maintain through this plan. So if I could stop here and get a sense of, you know, maybe on both of those issues, if there's a preference on 2040 or 2050 and about the terminology.
Sure. Councilmember Durham and Councilwoman Janik.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I think one of the areas that needs to be emphasized a bit more in this is the circularity of waste and or refuse and how it can come back. It's kind of buried in a couple of places here, but I think it needs more emphasis. And I realize why you've used the word waste, but when you use the word waste, that implies that it's worthless and that it's not good for anything. But I think what SEEK is trying to get at is that some of that is not waste if you treat it right, that there are other things that can be done with it. You know, recycling old clothes is a perfect example, and I think that's what SEEK is trying to get at, is there are things that can be diverted from that stream, and that's why I think they prefer to call it refuse instead of waste, and that makes sense to me. I realize that waste is a term that's used in the general plan, but it seems to me for this purpose, we don't need to be parallel on that, and that it would be good if we sort of made more of that distinction between waste and refuse, and that our goal is to provide more circularity to the recovery of it. So that's why I would support the commission on the use of the word refuse.
Can I ask if you have a thought on the 2040 versus 2050?
You know, on the theory that these are all aspirational and we're trying to force ourselves into doing the best, I have no problem with the 2040.
Thank you, Councilwoman Janik and Councilmember Graham.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I would say, I would reiterate what Councilmember Durham said. It would be nice to incorporate a circular economy diagram so that people begin to realize what goes around comes around. I think that would be a nice addition. And as far as staff versus SEEK, I have to tell you I'm comfortable with either. Again, because we can always exceed our goal. And again, they're aspirational, so I'm comfortable with what anybody decides is the best.
Thank you, Councilmember Graham, and then Councilwoman Littlefield.
Thank you, Mayor. I am pleased that overall city waste or refuse is down 13% since 2008. We should be proud of that. I think that's all kind of been done voluntarily with more education, or what would you say? What would you say was behind?
So there's a lot of different factors because there's a lot of different streams. I think a lot of what Solid Waste Services has done is education and more efficient sort of pickups and routing and looking at events. When you look at what's the diversion rate, some of that is also because our waste is getting lighter as we use more plastics rather than glass. So some of it is kind of a more structural change.
So that's weight, not volume.
Yes, this is a weight, not volume.
So even though the diversion rate has been static, gross numbers, it has gone down because it's 27% of a smaller overall denominator. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, ideally, I think the end goal, to the point about the circularity, is to minimize how much goes to the landfill.
And I think we all sort of have a certain amount of compunction when we fill up our trash cans and we're like, oh, too much. But I look at these goals and I do think both are aggressive. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, do you think even the staff recommendation, reduce single-family household levels by 25%, 90%. So you're going to tell people, is that the pink and the black trash can, 90%?
Yeah. So eventually, I mean, there's technology that exists today. I kind of referenced it that it's kind of what happens at the WM Open. They take everything and then they sort it behind the scenes, mm-hmm. and that's how you can. And they get down to a 90%. You can do that now. It's
okay.
we're hoping those costs would come down
Yeah.
and be something that's offered more widely.
Yeah, I'm all on board with ways we can waste less, and I know that packaging is getting lighter because companies want to save money. They want to package less. They, especially when energy prices are up, they want to be able to ship it, and everything, if this little widget weighs half an ounce or a fraction of an ounce less, over 7,000 miles, and we're sending 10,000, I mean, it makes sense. I don't know how we can get down. Is there any other way to get? Does this incorporate increasing costs on families or on residents?
I mean, I might have to defer to Solid Waste Services Director Bennett to answer that, if that's okay with the mayor and the council.
Mayor, are you okay with that?
Yes.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Specifically to this target, no. In all of the waste targets, no increases to our residents or costs. Well, this specific one, where we're trying to achieve just the 25%, this past year, Gina here, we've been doing a waste characterization study, and where we've been going to neighborhoods, pulling out 20 cans, taking them to the transfer station, and it's fun. We spread it on the ground, and we look what's in there. So we're seeing food waste, we're seeing some of our recyclables in there, and so forth, and other items. So some of that stuff that you're seeing, that 25% by 2030, that's the majority of what you're seeing. Then after that, aspirational, visionary, there is ways we can do that, but it's strictly just education, volunteer, as far as staff costs, it's all education.
I mean, to a certain extent, everything has a cost, but there's waste has a cost, and so we have to factor that. But are you saying that you think that we can get 90% reductions without raising rates on people?
At this point in time, we cannot achieve that without raising rates.
Okay. But you believe that you believe the 25% benchmark can be achieved without rate increases?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Thanks, Dave.
You're welcome.
Although don't leave because my colleagues may have questions for you.
Okay, Councilwoman Littlefield, myself, and okay. I'm just commenting that 10 years in any technology, any business is a heck of a long time. There could be some innovations and so forth. So as we look at 2040, that's 16 years from now. And the other one is 26 years from now. So these things are achievable, the great unknown and improvements in technology. When I look at waste as trips, we intend to save, gasoline, 1/4 of the trucks would not be needed to take that refuse to the transfer station. So all of that, even if it's achievable at 90%, that means we've reduced that fuel cost and so forth. So I think we're agreed on that one. I see Vice Mayor wants to weigh in, and we'll continue with the waste landfill discussion.
Yeah, I actually agree, and I think, Councilman Graham, I love your example of how the environmental decisions match with our economic desires. That's a great example that the companies are getting better environmentally because it saves them money, and it also keeps their air cleaner because they have, the plane doesn't take as much gas or the boat. So that is such a good example. And I also just want to say I do support the SEEK recommendation because we know that food waste is a huge component of our waste stream, and food waste is gold if we get it out of the food waste stream and to our local farmers. So I think and the cost, to the point about the question on costs of landfills, it's one of those things like power plants. You're paying a price until that landfill fills up, and then you're paying a really big price. Same with building a new power plant. So it's always, what's the cost of not doing it? We want the stuff out. We want our local food, veggies to be made with our food waste. So I think it's very achievable. So once again, I think I support SEEK on this one. And there's no penalty, but just goals. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilwoman Caputi and Councilwoman Littlefield.
First of all, I really like the word refuse instead of waste. I think, yes, we used waste in our general plan, but the general plan sits on top of everything else. The whole point of the sustainability plan is to get a little bit more granular. And I had never considered this before until I sat down with a few members from SEEK I literally had never considered the difference between the words waste and refuse, but I like refuse. I think for what we're trying to do with this plan, as my colleagues have mentioned, it makes a lot more sense, and it gets your brain thinking differently, which is the whole point. Again, another term that a SEEK member mentioned to me was sustainable materials management, and again, I've never thought about things like that, and then when you use the word refuse, you start thinking about it's not waste, it's something that could be made sustainable and managed better and along those lines. So definitely I think we should pick a word and stick with it in this plan, and refuse to me sounds like a word that makes more sense. Again, in terms of these targets, I feel like I'm not a climate scientist, as I think someone else mentioned up here before. I don't know which percentages are attainable or not attainable, but I do think it's really important that we just try to do better and that we get some quick wins. You know, we talked about this. The plan's going to be, it's aspirational, it's moving all the time, the technology's continually changing. I think we mentioned we're gonna keep revisiting it every 3 years, so let's just pick something that doesn't scare people, that gets them excited to start doing it. And then, you know, like with anything else, you know, you go on a diet and you lose a couple pounds, you get excited, and then you get more into it, right? I think we joked about that. Let's try to pick a target that doesn't frighten people, that feels attainable, that we can feel good about making some progress on, and then we can always adjust later. I think I'm very worried about getting hung up on, is it going to be 15% or is it going to be 20%? Is it going to be, you know, 2040 or 2045? I feel like we need a doable plan that makes sense and that we make some progress on it and make sure that it works for everybody. Thank you.
Excellent. Councilwoman Littlefield and then Councilmember Graham.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with what my fellow council members have been saying, and I do support the SEEK part on this. It's educational goals primarily that we need to work on, I think. People need to understand what they can do with some of this stuff and what's available, what options they have. Maybe one way to do that is through our water billing system. We, you know, put some ideas in each month about what you can do with this or what you can do with that, and how it can help. And so I agree with our Vice Mayor. I agree with Tammy, and I think it's a good idea to start. You start slow. You start working on it, and I think SEEK has the right recommendation on this one. Thank you.
Okay, there are 4 more decision points on waste landfill targets, so I'd like to go to 20 right now, and then we'll backfill on, continue through the next few decision points, and then we'll backfill with our nods. Thank you.
Yes. So if we can go to slide 21, I think we can maybe move through the next couple of these pretty quickly. It sounds like there's been agreement on the more aggressive sort of way of taking this. This is the target for the municipal landfill waste, so that's what cities, our city, it comes from city-owned buildings. Again, just as a reminder, this is one where we don't have the baseline data, but I think the targets were very similar here, and I think if I can, you know, I think from a head nods, I think we're looking at this one as also being the recommendations on the right. Next slide. I'm sorry, we missed one. Can you go back one more?
21. There we go.
Yes, sorry, I got confused. My apologies, I got confused on the numbers. This is, I think it's the same thing. I think I'll just make, just for the record, I wanted to make sure we had talked about this. This is the landfill waste sort of citywide. This is that long-term target. Once we hope to have the data on everything, again, we'll talk about this as the SEEK recommendation. Now if you can go back to 22. So the waste and diversion, the recycling rates, these are, there's also 3 of these. They kind of match up. This is just a slightly different way of kind of looking at this, whereas the first one talked about, well, what's left over that's going to the landfill. This is, again, just looking at that diversion or recycling rate. We likely will, it will be clear in the plan about how those are calculated. It's a little bit different in terms of what goes into this, depending on whether we're talking about single-family homes or not. But again, you know, we have these short-term targets and then some longer-term targets. If there's head nods, we'll proceed with the ones on the right. Okay. Next slide. So the next three targets, I think, are ones as well where there was, where we supported each other. The first one is just looking at specifically those commercial accounts that Scottsdale Solid Waste collects. Right now, only 18% of them recycle. We thought that was important. We can't really require it, but they have some strategies to work to increase that to 40%. Next slide. Organic waste diversion. This is one where we have very little data right now. This is, again, yard waste, food waste. So what we looked at this was sort of two different ways. One is to, again, kind of focus in on those existing brush and bulk pickups. We all have those monthly at our residence, and looking to try to increase how much of that gets diverted to 50%, make that a 50% diversion rate. Again, the new transfer station we think will be a great help on that. And then the second one is looking at, again, once we have a little bit more data, so these are a little bit longer, we have targets for that, just looking at how much of that organic waste we can keep out of the landfill kind of in total. So these were ways to look at that. Next slide. And then the last one, I think you all like this one. This deals with the contamination and the recycling bins. We pay more if there are things in there that aren't recyclable, if there are plastic bags, if there are things that aren't recyclable. The city does an excellent job right now keeping that contamination rate low, and this is a target to try to commit to keeping that even lower, saving costs for the city. Next slide. Again, just as a reminder, there's strategies and actions here. Again, we're looking at things like developing green event programs, encouraging the private haulers to bring recycling to the transfer station. And for all of these, we'll be looking at implementation plans and share more detail in those annual performance reports. So I want to stop if there's any final comments on solid waste.
Sure. At this point, I would just say that this council is sending a message. And the message is we do want to step forward in a responsible way. I believe the targets have been fully vetted on this waste question. So I'm in agreement with that. I'm also aware, talking to staff, that they believe these are achievable. There's even some beta or alpha of initial testing of equipment that's already in process in other parts of the country that might be able to achieve this. So it's great to set a target, but really to move forward so that vendors, suppliers, other innovations will continue in our favor as we go forward. So that's, I think that's the message we're sending today, that all the work has accumulated and it's in a very constructive manner. I see Councilmember Durham and Councilmember Graham, and then we'll move to our final energy component of this presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. I think there are a couple of places on page 22 where you may want to substitute refuse for waste. I need to think that through and whether we're going to follow the same sort of program that we mentioned earlier. On slide 22 in the last bullet point on both sides, we use the term waste.
Okay, thank you.
And I think that may be true on 24 also. On both sides, we talk about the waste stream. And then I think on the strategies and actions, there may be some places where the same terms maybe ought to be used. I think there are some places where it should be waste. I think there was one to, WST 1.4, work to make city-sponsored events zero waste, and I think that should remain waste, because we're trying to say that there should be no waste there. So there may be some other places on these, on the strategies and actions that should be looked at.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Graham?
Thank you, Mayor. Lisa, so I think for most of these, I probably go to staff, if either. Some of these, you know, I'm hearing things like we don't have enough data, we're still collecting, tons of municipal landfill waste collected TBD. So it's, the 25, so if I just kind of, I think the biggest one is residential waste, municipal waste that we're talking about. Some of the other ones are nice, but those are kind of smaller issues. And I agree with Councilwoman Caputi. It's, you know, we can start somewhere and feel good about it, but we should try to not do something that scares people. And so telling people that you will throw away 90%, and to get there, everything we know, we're gonna have to raise your costs to do that to you. And so, you know, I agree with Dave about 24. I don't agree, but I hear Dave about 25% reduction. We can do that with education, and I hope he's right. You know, that sounds fantastic to me. 90% is. I mean, how would you, Dave? Could I just? Am I saying the wrong name? Yeah. How do we? Let me ask you that. Let me frame the question this way. Correct? Yeah. How would you increase costs for people to get them? How would you discourage people to discard less?
Well, let me start off first by just clarifying. Right now, what we're trying to do between now and 2030 would not have any impact on the residential rates. To clarify, to get to 90% at a future time, if we try to do that, there may be, hey, if technology out there that we have to invest capital, then that may have effect on rates. Go ahead.
I mean, we're talking about there's so many variables we don't know, and we agree. We kind of seem to agree what we don't know. We don't know where technology, consumer taste, technology, and the way disposal works. But we know that if we go this route and nothing else changes, costs will go up. I don't know how does the customer get the bill? How do you get someone, say no variables change, how do you get a residential user to reduce waste by a substantial percentage?
Well, at a rates and fees presentation, I was trying to explain is that what we're trying to do with the transfer station expansion is going to do a lot for our residents and to reduce costs, stabilize rates. We're going to be able to peel apart some of that waste stream, take out that green waste, try to focus in on educating on food waste and some other avenues there. But what we're trying to do for the consumer is make it as easy as possible for them to make the right choices. So we're going to go target the commercial landscapers that are servicing their homes, large HOAs, get that out of their waste stream, make it easier for them to make the right choice, whether to put it out for the brush or bulk or just have their landscapers. Consumers are hard, right? With our residents, we utilize our outreach. We have people that are going out there and speaking at HOAs and all that. But again, it's a voluntary system. But 99.9% of our citizens recycle. They want to do the right thing. I agree. When you saw the last slide, the target of 14%, keep in mind that 14% contamination rate. Our citizens, that was done by Waste Management after a fire that we had in Murph. We took one load, we had it out there, go ahead, test our load. We have the cleanest recyclables in the city. There's no one that has even close to what we're doing. Our citizens do a great job. But to answer your question, it's a tough thing to do. It's a tough thing to get our residents, to recycle, but they are.
Right.
To get to where we're going to go as far as like 90%, those visionary, aspirational, as I mentioned before to you when we were meeting together, that's something that you're going to try to, I'm going to have to go to you when we go to waste conferences, see what other cities are doing, other countries are doing. I can come back to you and say, hey, this is what's out there. We can maybe target this part of the waste stream, and this is the impact that it'll have on our residents.
Okay, Dave, we don't have to belabor it anymore because I know what you're saying. It's an all sort of encompassing, comprehensive approach. 90% just seems like an aggressive number. And so, yeah, we have the best, recyclers, lowest contamination. 13% already in the last, dozen years, or give or take, reduction of waste. Like, I mean, that's, people in Scottsdale want to reduce their waste, and they want to recycle more. So we definitely want to give them options, and they just want things cleaner. And so I totally on board with that. The 25%, I like that. The 90%, until we know more about how to get there without hiking costs for people, that's where I'm hesitant on all this. So I won't belabor it anymore. And Dave, thanks for answering my question.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Concluding this topic, Vice Mayor Whited.
Just really quick, I agree. People, I got 2 different emails today to my home email asking how can I recycle more, and I actually have constituents from apartment complexes that live near me that come over to my house every couple weeks and use my pink bin. So people do want to recycle, and so I think that 90%, we're not talking about the people in houses recycling necessarily more, although let's get that darn yard waste and food waste, but also about giving this opportunity to people who live in condos and apartments, and then the businesses too. So I think the aggressive goals are because we're going to be targeting people that want to recycle and don't have that ability to now.
Thank you. Then we'll move on to energy.
Yeah, so thank you. Last section. We rely on electricity and other sources every day for microphones, for lighting, and when we use less energy, we can have cleaner air, health benefits. We can save money if households adopt efficient appliances and heating, cooling equipment can reduce a utility bill for an average household by up to $500 a year. This section is looking at 2 really important sort of strategies: installing more renewable energy like solar panels and improving that efficiency of the energy use. Not necessarily using less. This is not shivering in the dark from that 1972 speech with President Carter. This is about finding ways, these are more efficient lights. We get better light for less energy. That's what we're focused on. So the city gathered a lot of data on this, if you can go to the next slide, to understand how energy is used in Scottsdale, both in our city buildings, but also around in all of our buildings and places going back to 2018. So what you can see in this graph is that electricity use that we purchase from the utilities has stayed roughly the same. Now that might seem like a small thing, but that's kind of big. This has been a period of growth in this city. Usually more houses, more buildings means more electricity use. And there's a few reasons for that. One is we have green building codes that has meant that new buildings are more energy efficient. But it also has to do with that other graph up there and those blue little slices. So our residents and our businesses have installed 90 megawatts of distributed solar. These are the solar panels on rooftops, over parking lots. What is 90 megawatts? That's enough to power 14,000 homes. It's roughly the size of the city of Mesa's utility. It's a pretty substantial amount of generation. Without that, our electricity use from the purchases would have been 4% higher. In the same time frame, I don't really have a graph for this, but municipal, in city buildings, our electricity use also dropped slightly, and we'll be able to talk a little bit about that in a bit. Next slide. So one of the reasons that we care about energy use is that when we burn fossil fuels, that it emits that heat-trapping pollution in the atmosphere. To better understand these emissions, we compiled an inventory. So this is kind of an accounting kind of thing. We used international protocols and reporting requirements. And this allows us to kind of have a single metric or sort of a snapshot of how our total energy use can factor in, and it factors in how much clean energy we're using as well. So this allows us to then track the success of the common sense and cost-effective strategies that we'll be implementing to use energy more wisely and address other sources of emissions. So what we've seen is that between 2018 and 2022, citywide greenhouse gas emissions dropped by 7%. These emissions are about half due to electricity. We talked about why those went down. We're doing more energy efficiency, we have more solar. Another important reason is that, that utilities have been switching away from coal and towards natural gas. These are their own targets. I think Mayor Ortega mentioned SRP. Both SRP and APS have targets to be completely carbon-free by 2050. These are ones that they've set on their own. The graph on the right just shows that municipal emissions dropped a little bit more by 10%. We'll see whether that holds up. Just an interesting note, that dips in 2020 because during the pandemic, city buildings weren't in use. But that electricity use still happened just somewhere else in the city, and so that's why there's not a dip in the citywide ones. Next slide. So while the city's been pursuing energy efficiency, these may not be easy. These same kinds of measures may not be easy for all residents. It can sometimes involve upfront cost. If you're a renter, you don't get to replace your HVAC unit or your refrigerator. So people talk about an energy burden, and so this is the percentage of your household income that's spent on energy, and that's considered high if it's above 6%. So the average energy burden for all households in Scottsdale is under 2%, but we have households where for those who are 30% below that average mean income, where that average energy burden is up to 21%. And then we also wanted to track and measure the success we've had with green buildings. And so right now the city, we looked at 4 different green building standards. The IGCC that was just passed, LEED, the Scottsdale Green Building Program, and then the Green Rehab Guidelines from Human Services. These have been increasing and we expect it to rise more. It's currently 2%. Next slide. So here's now some of the areas you'll have seen the updates in your agenda packet somewhat. So for this first one, looking at citywide electricity use, staff, given that there's the potential for energy savings for our residents and our buildings, and because of the provisions of the energy code that we adopted, the staff is looking at a goal to reduce electricity use citywide. The commission has recommended a different method, you can see that in red, that focuses on the source of the electricity as an alternative, although that goal would reflect those efforts that utilities are making. And so if I can just stop here really to see if there's direction or thoughts.
Thank you, and we will have 7 decision points here. So leading off is Councilwoman, 7 other items where you'll ask for our input. We might do twosies or threesies just to see how they tie together.
Yeah, I think some of them will go faster.
Just to see how they tie together. But go ahead, Councilwoman Janik, please comment on this.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a question on this one. What is the recommendation from APS? What are they thinking is achievable?
So I have SRPs on the top of my tongue. Can I answer that question instead?
Sure.
I believe SRP has a target of 65% clean energy by 2030, and then both of them have 100% clean energy by 2050.
I like those, and that's the company that provides the energy, giving them to us. Somehow it would be nice to incorporate those. Thank you.
And as I mentioned that, it's just because this box and the next box is our own municipal electricity use, seem to pair together as, so just mention that one and we'll comment perhaps at 2 at a time if they're related.
Yeah.
Okay,
Can you advance one slide to 32? So this is, again, pairing electricity use, whereas that first one was citywide. This one is then municipal electricity use. looking at a 2035 standard. The city's already has already seen some progress in this area, as we mentioned, and then there's just a slight difference in the two recommendations of whether we thought we could get to a further 10% or 15% by 2035.
So looking at that, it would match up at 15%. So citywide and our own municipal would match up at 15%. I think they should pair together. I think we can do that with our own facilities. Is that okay? So we took care of those.
Okay.
Did you have another comment, Vice Mayor? Okay, then we'll go on to the next one, which has to do with distributed solar capacity.
Yeah, so in this one, my apologies. So what this short-term goal is, this 180 megawatt by 2030, envisions us doubling the amount of distributed solar capacity in the city. And that is in line with what the growth has been. It went up 15% in just a few number of years. We think in another period of time, doubling makes sense. Based on sort of some of our own sort of consultation, staff felt a long-term capacity that really more than tripled. So going up to 300 is another, well over a tripling of current capacity was realistic. Again, especially given sort of where the utilities are on what they're doing. And so you see the difference between staff and the commission is 300 versus 500 citywide. At the municipal level, the 3 megawatts is, that's not that many years out in terms of building these out. The 3 megawatts is if we build everything in the current bond projects. And so 5 megawatts would be us almost doubling that amount with no projects identified right now. But it is in 6 years.
Okay, well, I see Councilmember Graham wanting to weigh in. And I just have one comment on the solar. You know, for instance, the bond 2019 issuance included solar panels at several of our facilities. So we've always been tracking to provide, municipal in our building plan and building that out. Okay, Councilmember Graham.
Oh, Mayor, I was just going to ask, I guess I was going to request to speak on the energy at the end of it, so I...
Oh, okay. Yeah. Thank you. And at this point, we have Councilmember Durham. Do you want to speak to the solar capacity?
Yes. Thank you, Mayor. I would support the higher number for the municipal solar capacity because I think that's important. The city's a very big user of electricity. And one of the things also I noticed in this, and I don't think it's in your presentation, but on the on sort of the timeline list or the project list, there was mention of a solar study, a municipal solar study, and it gave a timeline for 3 to 10 years. And it seemed to me that that study ought to be accelerated because I realize that solar costs a lot of money, but one thing we've got around here is sunshine. So it just seemed to me that it would be a good use of our money if we could accelerate that study to do more solar. And I realize that we need the bond project to do some of that, but I think that we should look at more creative ways. And even if we can't do it right now, it makes sense to have a study that would look at what we can do. And so I would be in favor of accelerating that study, which right now is not supposed to start for 3 years. And I think we ought to try to get a head start on that.
I think the implementation table says we would complete it in 3 to 10 years. It's not the start date, but yes, we can.
Okay, so I'm on board also with the SEAC recommendation to 5 MWs on that, and it's also consistent with our green building plan where we're saying new construction should be adaptable. So that's an open door that will welcome more installations. Vice Mayor Whitehead, Councilman Janik, and Littlefield.
Yeah, well, thank you, Councilman Durham. I think that it's important to make the comment that if we go with the SEAC recommendation for 5 megawatts, clearly the city doesn't do anything that A, doesn't have funding, and B, doesn't make economic sense in the long run. And so we know that, well, actually, I don't know what this last year's electric bill was. A couple years ago, our city electric bill was $25 million. So that's dollars that leave our city. Those are dollars that don't go to our parks, don't go to police, et cetera. So investing in solar, I can tell you, I have saved so much money by having solar for 15 years or whatever I've had it for. So I guess I'll go with, I was going to go with staff, but I guess I'll support Councilman Durham, go with the SEEK recommendation, because again, we can always decide that financially it doesn't make sense, or we're getting, but then certainly the water campus, as Councilwoman Littlefield pointed out, needs a nice close look, because it was about 13 or 16 million of the bill was over there at the water campus. So anyway, thanks.
Councilwoman Janik, and then Councilwoman Littlefield.
Thank you, Mayor. I too think we should go with the SEEK recommendation. I think it is compatible then with the greenhouse gas emission target as well, so the two work hand in hand, which is great. And then the other thing is, I think what Councilmember Durham was talking about was NRG 2.6 under implementation energy, and it's 3 to 10 years. I would suggest, can we just make it maybe 1 to 10 years so that we know that we can start looking at it sooner? Does that seem reasonable?
I think we could move it into the 1 to 3 category just for consistency. But again, that is meant to be the completion date, not the initiation date for, and I'm only pointing that out to make sure that's clear for all of the strategies and actions. That's meant to be when they're done, not when they're started.
That's very good information. Thank you.
Councilman Littlefield.
Thank you. I agree with my colleagues. I like the SEEK recommendation. I also think it's a good recommendation to work with because citizens are comfortable with this. They know what it is, they know how it works, and they know it does work. So I think we're going to have good support from our citizens on this, and I think it's a rational and reasonable thing to do. So I go with the SEEK recommendation on this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Continue.
So the next 3 slides are again, ones where where the commission and staff were supported each other. So the first one is for a greenhouse gas emissions target to hit 45% by 2035 and 90% by 2050. This is really based on sort of the best available understanding of where market trends are going, where it's expected that not only the utility targets, but also other trends on energy efficiency, changes in electric vehicles and other places. Next slide. We have the exact same target for the city. This was perhaps one of the few areas where we weren't sure that the city could get too far ahead of citywide, in part because so much of our emissions are driven by electricity, and we have the utilities looking at with their targets. The next slide is energy burden. Again, this is an aspirational slide. We're kind of finishing where we ended, of a slide where we have a time-bound target for something that we think is the vision for the future that we want, but not a specific reduction. Next slide. And then green buildings. Again, we wanted to, these will still, the target says green buildings, it will still just be those 4 areas that we enumerated, looking to increase that to 10% by 2035. Given the leadership that the city's had in green buildings, we thought this was really important to include. If you just go, we have one more slide. Again, there are strategies and actions, the implementation table, and again, looking at improving municipal performance. There's a lot of things that we'll be able to do here. So before I just have a couple more slides on next steps, just wanted to stop to see if there were any other thoughts on or direction on energy.
Councilmember Graham, Councilmember Durham.
Thank you, Mayor. So I will just kind of round up or summarize my positions. Energy, citywide electrical use, achieve citywide 70% clean energy use by 2030. That's a SEEK recommendation. It's You know, the problem with that recommendation is that a lot of that is just outside of our control. We just, you know, that we're hoping that the utilities, you know, achieve their goals. And so I think that I would avoid that recommendation because of so much of it is not within our control. Municipal electricity use and distributed solar power, I think I'd probably go with staff and on those for some of the same reasons. So thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Durham and Councilwoman Caputi.
Thank you, Mayor. You haven't said anything in this section explicitly about EVs. I assume that maybe the use of EVs is behind some of the targets about reducing emissions and so forth and so on. And I'm just curious about how much you're relying on the use of EVs, because there's been a lot of bad news in the press recently about them. The CEO of Hertz just lost his job because he was relying too much on the popularity of EVs. And Mr. Isaac sent us an email earlier today that pointed out a number of problems, and I really don't know. You know, I'm no expert on the issues he's raised, but it just seems to me that over-optimistic views on the use of EVs may lead us down the wrong path in some of these targets, and I'm just curious about how much these targets rely on that.
Right. So we covered a little bit more on electric vehicles in the air quality section. That seemed to be a really important place given, some of the reasons, but, some of the efforts behind that. Right now, for both city and citywide and municipal emissions, the majority of the largest percentage is electricity. And for the municipal buildings, it's over 60% is electricity. And so that's our buildings. So in terms of how much the greenhouse gas emissions targets rely on progress on EVs, it's much more on buildings than that. We are looking, it does look at, it does assume certain, progress is made on alternative fuel vehicles, but it's not, I think that's in part why I think we agreed on a slightly longer time frame for greenhouse gas emissions, even given the urgency that was shared among the commission. You heard Chair Brady talk about that, because we wanted to, that we think that it may be that long before we get some of those options in place to see those changes.
When you said buildings are the biggest source of emission, are you talking about the creation of the electricity? Whatever fossil fuels are used to create that electricity, or, okay.
Yeah.
So you're talking about the electricity used by the buildings that's
Yes.
created by fossil fuels.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Caputi, and then Vice Mayor Whited.
That's actually the point I wanted to make. I think, we can set all the goals we want, but at the end of the day, the utilities are really responsible for so much of this. I know I'd spoken with representatives of both APS and SRP, and they were talking about, people don't think about the fact that even if we switch over to cleaner technologies, the electric grid is being powered by coal and other dirty fuels, right? Natural gas, nuclear. So it's going to, a lot of how successful our goals will be are going to be dependent on how successful the utilities are in providing it for us. I just think we have to be careful that it's not going to be just like with the waste, where we were going to be able to achieve 90% of a savings because of what happens behind the scenes. I think a lot of the chapter in energy is very similar. Like the ability of us to be able to have, movements to more clean energy and more efficiency are going to have quite a bit to do with the direction that the utilities go in. I know that again, the APS rep that I talked to was chatting about all sorts of, we've mentioned so many times about differing technologies. You know, solar power sounds like a really great idea. We live in the desert, it's so sunny, and yet the issue that the rep was talking to me about was, it's here, but how do you know, the sunniest parts of the day are the middle of the day, and yet when people actually need the power is when they get home from work. So, you know, how do you put all of that solar energy into a battery that isn't that clean as well, right? And then provide it later in the day. So I think a lot of it is we're going to make our best effort, but we have to understand that there's also things that are going to be beyond our control that are going to impact our ability to get to where we want to go. That's all I'm saying.
And I think it's then important, I mean, I think you also, I think, are alluding to another point that we can start, you know, it raises the urgency to start now to make these changes. There's an urgency about where we want to be in the future. There's also an urgency, I think, about the actions we take starting next week on starting to try to see some of these reductions that we want to see.
I thought that, again, the point that our APS rep made was so interesting, that we're always thinking about water as being the scarce resource. And she said, power is also a scarce resource as we are growing here in Arizona. You know, there's only so much, and they have to continually figure out how are we going to keep making more power to power the grid, especially as we move towards more electricity, which requires a lot of power to generate. Where does that come from? And she was talking about, you know, small-scale nuclear and different technologies that are going to be required to have to keep up with the power demand. So just good things to think about.
And how much water electricity generation takes, not solar panels, but most of the other forms.
Yeah.
Well, you know, this isn't what I think.
Yes.
Thank you.
Go ahead,
Mayor.
Vice
Yeah,
Mayor.
you know, I just want to point out that the largest user of water in the nation isn't agriculture, it's conventional power. And the largest user of power in Arizona is, of course, the transport of water. So for anybody who wants to save electricity, I suggest you use less water, which then saves water and your pocketbook. So. But I think we're selling ourselves short. Yes, power, the sun is up during the day, but that is why all the utilities are investing heavily in storage. And so, and also the one point I really want to stress is I keep hearing it's up to the power companies to save us. No, it's not, because conservation, whether you're talking water conservation or energy conservation, delivers more bang for the buck than the power company is going to give you. And what I would like to see are, we talked about how much of a cost burden energy is. We know, we go through this every summer, we have senior citizens that have their home free and clear, but they cannot afford their power bill. And that is a burden to society, it's a burden to taxpayers, because we have programs where they don't pay some of the utilities, whether it be their water bill. And then we have, obviously, emergencies and death. So I really want goals that focus on this funding from the state through the county to retrofit homes for the lower income people, because that is how we lower the energy usage. That is how we lower the cost burden to our taxpayers. That is how we lower water usage, and that is how we lower heat. So I think that the watt that we don't ever need is the watt that will save us, and we need to focus on that in this plan. But with that, I support the recommendations, and I guess I'd like a nod from everybody if the recommendations are okay with you guys. Do I see some nods?
No.
Okay, I think we have some nods. Okay, thank you.
Great.
Well, good. So, you know, at this point, we covered energy, waste, and extreme heat. You've also included in our packet how we got here, all the timetable. And of course, at this point, I just want to call attention to the next steps. And then we'll just have some concluding thoughts if there's a concluding thought. So we can scroll through this. We initiated this as a council. We've had input throughout the process. We expect that the SEAC will continue to monitor. We have our own duty to our own taxpayers and ratepayers to
monitor our energy, sustainability, and water use. So at this point, can you summarize that and get to the next step? That's really where we're
Yes.
at.
So
I
this
would
was just
advance this.
meant to be a really quick recap of where we've been, that we held 4 community meetings, if you can advance it. You know, since March, the commissions had discussed the plan at 11 meetings. You go ahead and advance it. And we, of course, also had, 4 different work study sessions on this before tonight. And so, I feel like I've received very clear direction on the rest of the plan here tonight. And so really hoping that there's direction from the council about sort of the timing and a target date for bringing this back for adoption.
Sure. It's my feeling that we have covered everything pretty completely, and I'd like to see it in a final form so that we could take action before the recess, if possible. Depending on the clerk and availability, I think we might be able to do that, and I'd like to see that done, perhaps as early as the end of May. I know that there's a possibility of a 3rd meeting in May, but that would keep everything fresh. We keep quoting data from a year ago because that was the latest, or 2 years. So if the longer this waits, these actions I think are very appropriate. So let's weigh in. I'm for proceeding with this in completed form. Councilmember Graham, Councilmember Durham.
Thank you, Mayor. Just some concluding thoughts. I think, a lot of these goals from my perspective are, there's some speculation. There's some things that are outside of our control. There are some things that we don't know. We have multiple studies. We have a solar study. We've got a shade study. So it would be nice. It'd be nice to have more information than to rush it until, a selected date. I think that, really being sensitive to accepting how much we don't know, and then understanding that these actions could lead to higher costs for our residents. It was mentioned just a second ago about, the retiree that can't afford their utility bills. And then we also talk in the same meeting about we're doing things that will raise your utility bills. And so it's, using, minimizing unknowns, minimizing, feel-good aspirational things that are just simply outside of our control. A lot of what was said up here I agree with. A lot of what I heard up here made perfect sense. And I think that there is, there are a few aggressive benchmarks in here, and I know it's not a cap, it's not a mandate, it's not we're not forced to do it. I understand these are just goals that we feel good about, but there is a bottom-up approach from the Scottsdale citizenry about we want things that are cleaner, we want things that are, we want a cooler city. We're tired of all this dang heat island, or what can we do to kind of chip away at that? So it's about kind of balancing those two perspectives, because I'm gonna go look up that movie Shivering in the Dark, or that commercial Shivering in the Dark. What was it called?
It was an advert that President Carter did during the energy crisis, and it was referred to as the Shivering in the Dark because he said, turn your thermostat down, put on a sweater, turn off the lights. That's not how we're trying to approach this.
We don't want shivering in the dark. Right?
No.
In Scottsdale, it'd be sweating in the dark, wouldn't it?
Correct. Better analogy.
Well, I mean, at nighttime in the summer, you're sweating in the dark. I mean, we don't want that. So I think it's about, reasonable measures to reduce our emissions, to reduce our waste or refuse, or however term we want to quibble about. And I think that personally, the least divisive and least controversial of these 3 topics tonight is going to be the heat island, or excuse me, the shade heat island. Same thing. So a lot of good work has been put into this from SEEK and from staff. I think that we should respect what the thoughtfulness that has been put into it while accepting constraints, limitations, unknowns, and variables that are simply not within our control. So appreciate this discussion tonight. I think we should kind of talk about it more, slow it down, hear each other out, and see where we are. And so with that, I'll stop letting out so much hot air.
Okay, Councilmember Durham and Councilwoman Janik.
Thank you, Mayor. Literally everything in here is something that we don't know by definition. We don't know where any of this is going, but we also know that we've got to do something. There was a famous quotation by, I can't remember if it was Leo DeRocher or Casey Spengler, that said something about, had something to do with predicting the future is hard, and it was very funny, but I can't remember exactly how it goes. But anyway, yeah, we don't know what this is going to do, and in terms of protecting citizens and taxpayers, there'll be other people sitting up here 10 years, 20 years from now, and I think they'll be responsible, and they'll try to protect residents from the worst impacts that might come from rising costs. And if we do these things, our costs are probably going to go down for electricity, for waste, for other things. So I don't think we have any choice but to go forward with this. I do want to say, though, that I think most of us, this is a top-level view that you've given us today, and I know I've read through the details of some of it, and I have some more questions, and I hope we're going to get together soon to go over more details that I don't want to bore people with in a meeting that's already gone. So I want to work on some of that detail over the next couple of months, but I do want to get something done pretty quickly, and I'm certainly not going to hold that up. Thank you.
Okay, Councilwoman Janik.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much, Lisa, for a wonderful job. You pulled a lot of things together, and it works, and we've pretty much agreed to most of the suggestions. I appreciate all the time SEEK puts in to get the detail, to get the baseline data, and I hope that the citizens embrace this. We're not forcing it on them or asking them to give it a try to make Scottsdale a better city, a cooler city. And as a scientist, I truly believe we can do it, and we will do it. And then just, this is a little bit more specific. Under extreme heat, where you just say, ensure that the community prevents extreme heat, somehow, maybe in the introduction, relate the fact that it's all connected. Our actions elsewhere in the plan, in addition to everything in the extreme heat section, prevents the extreme heat. All the pieces come together to make the whole plan cohesive and effective. And the timeline, specifically, I really, really want it done before summer break. We've talked about it. We've got general agreement. And I think it's time to move forward, and I think we're all ready for it. Thank you.
We'll do that. If I can just add one thing, we will be adding an executive summer, and I think that'll be a really good place to make these connections. It's a little hard when they're in separate chapters. When we have some opening pages, I think we'll work to do that.
Well, thank you. I believe we're concluded, and before I call for a motion to adjourn, I just thought I'd leave one scary thought to Councilmember Graham, okay? So in 2040, your kids will be voting, okay? Just think about that. Okay.
With that, I'll move to adjourn.
I second the motion. All in favor, please say aye.